Independent Office of National Statistics has conducted vital work on the state of immigration. That is 4 times the migration levels compared with 2019. Well, that's unforgivable. And mark my words, this government will turn the page.
Labour's new deportation plan is virtually identical to what the Tories proposed last year. The same party that condemned the Rwanda scheme as immoral is now pushing policies that would make even Suella Braverman nod in approval. If you're wondering whether there's any real difference between the two major parties anymore, you're not alone. In this video, we're exposing exactly how Starmer's fresh approach is actually just the Conservative playbook with a red cover. The similarities will shock you. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. Is there any meaningful difference between Labour and Conservative immigration policies anymore?
The Independent Office of National Statistics has conducted vital work on the state of immigration. The ONS sets out nearly 1 million people came to Britain in the year ending June 2020.
As Labour's new deportation plan emerges, the similarities are striking enough to make even the most loyal Labour voters squirm uncomfortably in their seats. Keir Starmer, once positioned as the compassionate alternative to Tory harshness, has unveiled an immigration approach that bears an uncanny resemblance to the very policies he previously denounced. Let's examine what's actually in Labour's newly announced plan. The framework includes expedited deportations for failed asylum seekers, expanded detention capacity, and stricter border enforcement measures, all wrapped in rhetoric about taking control of Britain's borders. Sound familiar? It should. These are the same core components that form the backbone of Conservative immigration policy under both Sunak and his predecessors. The hypocrisy becomes particularly glaring when we recall Starmer's previous condemnations.
And found the previous government were running an open borders experiment. That is 4 times the migration levels compared with 2019.
Just 18 months ago, he stood in Parliament declaring the Conservative deportation strategy cruel, impractical, and extortionately expensive. His shadow Home Secretary called detention centres inhumane and promised a complete overhaul of the system. Yet here we stand, watching Labour adopt nearly identical policies, while somehow expecting us not to notice the about-face. The similarities don't end with broad strokes. Both parties now advocate for rapid processing centres, increased enforcement personnel, and bilateral agreements with foreign nations to accept deportees. Both emphasise breaking the business model of people smugglers. Both prioritise removing those with no legal right to remain. The difference? Mainly the colour of the rosette worn by those promoting the policies.
Time and again, the Conservative Party promised they would get the numbers down. Well, that's unforgivable. And mark my words, this government will turn the page.
What's particularly troubling is Labour's linguistic gymnastics to rebrand these approaches. Where Conservatives spoke of deterrence, Labour talks about disincentives. When Tories pushed offshore processing, Labour proposes international cooperative solutions. It's the same wine in a bottle with a different label, a political sleight of hand designed to pacify traditional Labour voters while pursuing essentially Conservative policies. This transformation didn't happen overnight. Starmer's rightward drift on immigration represents a calculated political gamble.
Time and again, they failed. And now the chorus of excuses has begun. Because a failure on this scale isn't just bad luck.
Internal polling likely showed that traditional Labour constituencies, particularly in post-industrial northern areas, favour tougher immigration controls. Rather than attempt to change minds through principled leadership, Starmer chose the path of least resistance, adopting his opponent's playbook while pretending it's something new. The cynicism of this approach becomes even clearer when examining the timing. As the general election looms, Labour strategists evidently fear the immigration issue could derail their commanding poll lead. Rather than developing a distinctively Labour solution, they've opted to neutralise the issue by mimicking Conservative positions, hoping voters won't scrutinise the details too closely. Everyone within Labour's ranks is willing to play along with this charade. Behind closed doors, a significant rebellion is brewing. Multiple shadow cabinet members have reportedly expressed serious reservations about the plan, with at least 2 threatening resignation. Backbench MPs, particularly those from the party's left flank, have been more vocal, anonymously telling The Guardian that the new approach represents the final abandonment of what Labour is supposed to stand for.
But what we didn't hear, what the British people are owed, is an explanation. This happened by design, not accident. Policies were reformed.
The grassroots reaction has been even more severe. Momentum, the left-wing Labour organisation that flourished under Corbyn's leadership, issued a scathing statement calling the plan morally bankrupt and indistinguishable from Tory cruelty. Local Labour branches across the country have passed motions condemning the leadership's new direction, creating the potential for a significant rift as the election approaches. What makes this particularly difficult for many Labour supporters is the sense of betrayal. Many joined or supported the party precisely because it offered a humane alternative to Conservative approaches on issues like immigration. To see their leadership not just compromise but essentially capitulate on such fundamental values raises difficult questions about what Labour now stands for, beyond simply wanting power. The uncomfortable truth is that Starmer's fresh approach to immigration is essentially the Conservative playbook with a red cover. The policies, mechanisms, and even much of the rhetoric are lifted wholesale, cosmetic changes to presentation.
It isn't a global trend or taking your eye off the ball. No, this is a different order of failure, deliberately, to liberalise immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose.
For voters genuinely concerned about immigration policy, the choice is no longer between competing visions, but between essentially identical approaches implemented by different teams. So here we are, left with a stark reality that few would have predicted just a few years ago. The British political landscape has morphed into a bizarre pantomime where red and blue ties are the only meaningful distinction between our 2 main parties. What choice do voters actually have when Labour and Conservative immigration policies are virtually indistinguishable beneath the thin veneer of rhetoric? This convergence strikes at the very heart of our democratic system. When parties abandon their founding principles to chase polling points, they're not just shifting strategy. They're betraying the very voters who supported them based on those core values. Labour's transformation isn't evolution, it's erasure of identity. For voters, the question becomes not just which party to support, but whether our traditional 2-party system still serves any purpose at all. When political expediency consistently trumps principle, perhaps it's time to look beyond the established options. After all, what's the point of having 2 major parties if they're both reading from the same script with different coloured logos?